Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live session, Why Won't They Speak English? Today, I am here with Dalia and Eleanor, the authors of the report, Why Won't They Speak English? Dalia Al-Hawari is a lecturer of English as a foreign language pedagogy and curriculum at the Faculty of Education, Alexandria University, Egypt. And she has over 20 years of experience working in initial teacher education and teacher professional development programs. And her recent research interests focus on exploring children's experiences of learning English as a foreign language in challenging and under-resourced contexts. We also have today Eleanor, who's a professor of learning and pedagogy at UCL Institute of Education in London, UK, and her research and teaching focus on eliciting children's voices about schooling in the UK and globally, with the aim of enhancing social justice in schooling system. Hello and welcome, Dalia.
Hello, thank you for the introduction.
And Eleanor, hi. We missed Eleanor at the beginning, but here you go again. Hi, Eleanor. Hi, Dalia.
Hi, very honoured and happy to be part of this. Thank you.
If you are watching in our live, please let us know where you are now and what are you doing, what do you do. We will move to talk a little bit about this amazing research paper. Can you tell us a little bit about this research paper, Dalia and Eleanor? Maybe a little bit of a background about this report and the research.
Okay.
We can't hear you, Dalia.
Okay. This better? Okay.
Yes.
This research was conducted in primary schools in Egypt. And as if you're familiar with the context in Egypt, we know that because the system is more of a teacher-fronted one where more traditional methods are used. So developing speaking competence in particular is very challenging for both the students and the teachers. So we wanted to explore and see if we can introduce small change in the form of using pair work, but in a different way. If this could help promote speaking skills and also help the young learners reduce the feelings of anxiety and increase their autonomy, which we know enhance learning in general, and we also thought they would also enhance speaking in particular. Eleanor?
You mentioned autonomy, but if you can define it to our audience, what do you mean
Yes.
by autonomy? Yes.
So, in general, in education, especially formal education, children have to do what they're told and they don't have much choice. And that's necessary when you have classrooms with 90, 100 children in them. However, with speaking, it's simply not appropriate. You cannot learn to speak very proficiently if you're simply doing what you're told, because you have to be a little bit creative when you're speaking. You have to make links yourself. And so that's why this autonomy, or we sometimes say it's reflecting agency, is so important.
So by giving those skills, you mean that students would go to the larger environment and be able to learn by themselves on their own. So that makes them speak English. And if you're in the
Yeah.
audience, if you're watching, please let us know if your students do have any problems speaking English in the classroom. What are the challenges that they face? Please leave that in the comments. That's a very it's a good direction, I guess, also for the Egyptian context, because there's lack of authority for children in the classroom. So I don't know if you agree with me, but if there are any more, context-related information to share with us about the Egyptian
You mean about
context and why autonomy is important in that specific context.
Okay. Eleanor, would you like to comment on this or shall I?
Yeah, you go ahead, Dahlia.
Okay. So we've been very lucky because we conducted previous research in the Egyptian context. We worked with children in schools and listened to them. So Egyptian context is a very top-down context where curricula, the course books, the exams all come from top-down. So teachers and children do not really have a say about what they learn or how they learn. Um, it's also very teacher centered, and more traditional methods are used because of so many reasons, but one of them is maybe large classes, lack of resources, and so on. So we learned from our previous research and talking to children and teachers that what happens in classes mostly is learning about English rather than practicing English. And this, of course, affects opportunities for practicing speaking in class.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because it's also a problem not just in Egypt, but in a lot of Arab countries as well, and not just Arab countries, but other contexts where children are not given the chance maybe to speak English and practice, and
Yeah,
maybe they don't have the
can I?
outside atmosphere also to speak or practice.
Mm, mm. Can I just mention when we asked the children in our first project how they whether they were happy with them, what changes they would like, and they gave very, very useful insights, which we
Uh-huh.
maybe hadn't quite. They were so delighted, overjoyed was the word they used, to be asked. They said, "No one's ever asked me what I think before of on me." Like
Wow,
their
yeah.
view
uh,
is so important because it's for them. So we have to know how
uh-huh.
they're experiencing it.
Yeah. From the research and throughout the findings, what did you find out? Can you tell us a little bit about the findings of this research?
Okay. So, as I just mentioned, we explored how the use of pair work in a certain way. And by this, I mean, for example, using closed pair work, encouraging teachers to use pair work when everyone is speaking and working at the same time. The teachers were used to using open pair work where they just ask a couple of students to come to the front of the class, perform some task, and then go back to their places. Instead, we encourage the teachers to let go and let everyone work at the same time and speak at the same time. So teachers were afraid of noise, losing control, management issues, and so on. But with support, they were willing to experiment. So by using pair work in this way and encouraging teachers to support learners' autonomy, competence, and relatedness, we found out that students felt less anxious, more autonomous, and this eventually helped them to speak and practice English more.
Changing the, sorry, oh yes, I didn't catch the last part, but yes. Changing the pairs did play a huge dynamic here in producing the language or how they feel about how they feel in that space or in the classroom, and that in return inflected on their performance where you felt that they are more upfront or they are less shy to speak. Is that you know did I summarize it right? Just
Yes, that's
Exactly.
yeah, okay, great.
that,
We have some
that's right.
comments coming in, and I see this comment from Georgie. He's saying, my learners are shy at the time of using the language, and it's because they are afraid to make mistakes. And right there is when I teach them that mistakes are not always mistakes. So by doing so, they feel more confident to talk.
Mm, mm.
We also
So
Okay.
have another comment
we
from Shanta. She's saying, I sound boring, I therefore encourage and I still change for self so
Mhm.
so that they mirror my actions.
Mm. I was just going to say that if if the children don't get a chance to
Mhm,
speak in a situation where they feel comfortable, they
mhm,
won't experience competence. They won't feel, I can do this. They'll feel, I can't do this. And therefore, they won't keep trying. So, what we found was that as long as the conditions were right, if they were with the right partner and they felt comfortable, they could at least experience a little bit of success in speaking. And then they might start seeing themselves differently and thinking, actually, this is something I might be able to do.
yeah. Especially when they see others also being encouraged to speak, so that pushes them. So you talk about pairing, and here for autonomy purposes, you encourage that students choose their own, choose the pairing. Um, does that, affect the way they interact, or if they speak or not, if they whether they're given that choice, or do you think that teachers sometimes should also dictate that kind of dynamic in certain way? So, like for example, being more strategic in planning.
Uh, what were really amazing about the finding of the research is that um, children wanted very much to work with someone they liked, and they were focused on their learning. It was not because just they wanted to feel relaxed and to have fun, but they wanted to learn better. And they told us that when they had someone they trusted, they felt comfortable with, they felt encouraged and they felt it was okay to make mistakes and it was okay to ask for help. And this supported them very much and like gave them a push to speak and participate more in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is something that teachers should bear in mind when they like think of strategies to use for pairing students. At least should be one of the strategies for pairing learners.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We have a comment from Ernie saying, "In my class, there are most passive students, even though the teacher has created the class so interactive. The case of lack of vocabulary, lack of self-confidence."
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
yes,
So
I agree. Sometimes different
there's
needs for different students. Yes, go ahead.
there's a tendency to think that, oh, I know, I'll put someone who's really strong in English speaking with someone who's really weak. And maybe sometimes that is appropriate, but when you want to practice speaking, I think that would be frustrating for both partners in that relationship. So the one who's very strong will want to talk with someone else who's at their same level, and the child who's struggling will feel probably, or so the children told us in the study, feel intimidated and feel even more useless possibly than they already did. So if someone chooses who they go with, they choose their level and they know what's appropriate for them. Obviously, in a very, very big classroom, it's not always possible, but at least you can ask the child to choose which child next to them they go with, if it's a matter of, one side or the other, if they're in rows, which many of our
Mhm.
children will.
And do you see the dynamics being different between maybe primary learners and different age groups?
Um,
For example, if the group is
I
teenagers, does the pairing differ if they are teenagers compared to primary learners?
I think in principle it won't differ.
Mm,
I would very much encourage the audience and the teachers to go and check the report, the drawing sections. We asked the children in our research to draw how they felt during pair work. And many of the drawings reflect
They
their
look
feelings about,
fantastic, by the way, the drawings. So I
yes, and
encourage
very
everyone to look at
expressive.
it. Yes.
Exactly. I mean, some of the drawing reflect how they felt about peers, the peers they
Mm-hmm.
were working with. Some of the drawings are negative and some are positive. The negatives one show the pressure children were under when they worked with someone who was not supportive, someone who was impatient, someone who was intolerant of their classmate making mistakes. And the other drawings were fantastic because they showed what effect peer support had. Like I remember one of the drawing, one child drew herself working with a supportive peer, and she wrote some. I think she wrote something like, "My peer helps me, and I can go on and complete the task."
Mm-hmm.
So
So she felt supported by the,
exactly.
the beer, and that, changed their productivity as well.
Exactly. So,
Mm,
and
mm,
as Eleanor said, I think teachers need to experiment with different ways of pairing
Mm-hmm.
students, but they need, I think, in principle, ensure that every students get peer support and that peer pressure is really minimum if we want the classroom to be successful.
Yeah. And I guess
I
here
think
pairing is a strategy, but in different classrooms, there are different strategies. But the point
mm,
is to make your students feel safe, no matter what the strategy is. But pairing for you was one of these strategies to, release some of that stress, maybe.
I think
Exactly.
we have to keep remembering that the point of doing pair work is not an assessment. We are not assessing students. We are giving them the opportunity to practice their English, which they desperately want. So if we take away the idea that the teacher's judging them and looking out for mistakes, and they feel like it's a bit of space, maybe even just 5 minutes in this one lesson where they can just try out what they do know rather than be judged for what they don't know, then I think
Yeah.
this is the really important point. So even the person who the teachers despair about, who never seem to do anything, they matter too. They need to practice perhaps more than everybody else.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. And on the same topic here, we have a comment from Mansario, who says a key to develop autonomy in learning, the teacher needs to keep a close look as the communicative activity goes on. Monitoring is a chance to support the process. Um, how do you see the role of monitoring as well in supporting strategies so that encourages students to speak more in the classroom?
Oh, monitoring. I think this is it's a big issue, and it was one of the biggest challenges we faced when we worked with the teachers. Teachers tend to think that they have to monitor students very closely and check that everyone, I mean, is working and everyone is producing correct English. I mean, as Eleanor said, that pair work should be a chance for practice, but sometimes teachers feel that it's also for assessment. So it's like we teachers find it very difficult to just let go of this idea of correctness. What we found in our research, and again, I will kind of encourage everyone to go and look at the drawings, is that when teachers monitored pair work from very closely, some of the students felt intimidated by the teacher's presence, and this made them, in their own words, stutter, forget um, what they wanted to do, and instead of focusing on the task, they were focusing on thinking about what should I say, what does the teacher expect me to say, what if I say something wrong, will the teacher punish me, will the teacher think that I'm useless? So they drifted away from the task. Whereas when teachers monitored from a distance, this gives students the space to experiment, to speak, and to try to produce English.
Yeah, so
But we
it's that space where they are experimenting and trying to put that language into practice.
But
Eleanor, I see that you want to add something here.
I was just going to say that it's probably useful to have a signal like raising your hand if you want some help. So the students don't feel abandoned. They know the teacher's there to help if they want help, if they want advice about a word to use or how to say something, then that needs to be there. So the teacher isn't sitting at the side on her phone. No, she's absolutely watching everybody, but not in a judgmental way.
Yeah, and that's also a way of encouraging autonomy at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, because
Mm-hmm.
you are encouraging them to work on their own, maybe find their answers,
Exactly.
fact check or discuss, and then produce. So,
Yes,
uh,
and I think it's important to say that before they start doing pair work, there's a lot of support that has to happen in advance. So, for example, you might write on the board at the front of the class the words that might be useful and go through those with the student beforehand. So they're not left on their own. They've had
mhm.
lots of support. But once they've
They
had
know
the
where
support,
to find you.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. Um, uh, just a question to our audience. How do you choose pairs? So if you can answer this question in the chat, how do you choose pairs? I know that you mentioned in the study that choosing pairs is kind of also another way to encourage autonomy. But can you talk to us a little bit about some of the methods maybe you can use to pair students if you don't want them to choose, like other methods to pair students other than having them to choose, maybe fun ways to pair students?
um, Random. So you could assign numbers and then go like all one. I mean, students who have similar numbers come together, colors. So any of these fun methods under random, or if you're working in a very large classroom, students who sit next to each other. But I think the most important thing, as we mentioned before, it's very important that teacher experiment with different techniques and then listen to the students and find out how they experienced pairing in this way. Was it supportive or not? What needs to change? Because we learned from doing research that if teachers do not really listen to the students, sometimes teachers think that they're doing the right thing and everyone should be learning, whereas students actually are not learning. So we need always to be listening to our students.
Mm.
Yeah. And how do you ensure that they are learning? I mean, speaking is one of them. I feel like when a student speaks, that they do show that they are learning. But some people may not be very articulate or talkative, so they produce in different or other ways. So how do you ensure that they are learning?
One of the strategies teachers used in our research was, after doing pair work, inviting students who wanted to come to the front and like role play the task in front of the class. So inviting rather than imposing or assigning certain students. And I think there are other ways as well. Maybe students can show that they're learning using um, maybe other methods like writing, maybe drawing.
Mhm.
All these can be used.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. We have it's a comment that mentions the role of, let me read it. To consider the bilingual multilingual scenario, it is confusing at times for the tender minds to express. However, adult teens understand this. They are expressive but are not vocal or loud enough.
I have to say, we didn't have any problems with the children talking. They were so
Mhm.
eager to talk because normally in classes they have to be quiet, and suddenly someone's saying you can express yourself. So we really didn't experience that problem. I don't think at all. But certainly the teacher will be checking, and if she sees that there's a pair who's not talking, well then she will go and say, "Can I help you? Is there anything you need from me?" So that's. But really, I think this won't be.
We also have a comment from Rajiyat Aljana. Uh, Sorry, Eleanor, you did you? Yeah, okay. It says, Rajiyat Aljana says, creating a motivating environment helps a lot, uh, and it helps learners to feel comfortable and learn better. Um,
Totally agree. Totally agree, Miss.
Yeah, and there's another comment from Rabilo who says, I always encourage students to speak English and language one in classroom. I love to work in groups and pairs. It is sometimes really hard because a class is too noisy, mess, um, but students enjoy a lot depending on how we teachers plan our classes and the activities we bring to them. I have failed, got frustrated in some opportunities, but I've learned a lot. I celebrated much when class worked well and students participated in an activity. Oh, that's great.
Could add,
Um,
it's fantastic that keep going even though you had difficulty. It's easy to try it once and it's very difficult. No, give it at
yeah,
least
and
three goes and something each time a little bit and see, and talk to the students. So what would make it better? They know really you could do differently.
do you encourage using a home language or language one for to facilitate that purpose, or do you usually stick to using English only in the classroom?
I
I
think
mean, when facilitating the instructions or pairing them.
it's I think it's okay to use children's mother tongue in class, as you said, for instructions, for facilitating things, as long as this will make things easier.
Yes.
And as
Mhm.
Eleanor said, if you want the children to be on task, you do a lot of, preparation work with English, like teaching the pre-vocabulary, doing rehearsal before you ask the children to work on their own.
Yeah. We talked a lot about autonomy, but if you can also tell us a little bit about relatedness, how important it is that the materials are also related to students so they can interact and speak. But yeah, tell us a little bit about it if yeah.
Well, I think there are two issues here. One is whether the materials relate to the interests and the purposes of the children, and this is really important. If you give them a boring dialogue to just speak out, I mean that is useful. It's better than not speaking at all. If every child has read a dialogue, this is great. But if you can give them something really interesting that they really care about to talk about, this will inspire them even more. So, relating the topic to what they care about is number one. But the other one is relatedness among the children in the classroom, as well as between the children and the teachers. So
Mhm.
if the children fear the teacher all the time and don't like her or him, then it's going to damper on the whole environment. But especially it's about being related to the other children in the classroom. What a great opportunity when you've got 60 children in a classroom, what a rich diversity of experience and language there to use. So if they don't feel comfortable with each other, it's going to really inhibit their confidence walk. I'm sure Dahlia has more to say on that.
Yes, Dalia.
Oh, we've lost Dahlia.
So looking at the comments, maybe we can look at the comments because Dalia disappeared. So it's me and Eleanor now. Um, there was a comment on multilingual settings since we mentioned that.
I may say
Samba's
it's.
saying
I think it's something.
strict rules must be enforced to students and teachers to do all communication in English in and out the classroom.
Yes, I was just going to say it's very much dependent on the context. So there are rules like that, and of course those have to be respected, and there are good reasons for them. On the other hand, if you don't have those restrictions and you think it will help them to speak English for this short time in the lesson, then go ahead and do it. So some of the children in our study said they just didn't understand what the teacher was saying, so they felt useless because the instructions were in English. They didn't understand them. They didn't know what they were doing. They felt stupid. So yes, use the L1 if that works in your situation. If not, then maybe get the children to tell you what they're supposed to be doing before they start doing it to check that they fully understand.
Yeah, and maybe they can say that in their home language, or it could be in English, or maybe to their partner, to the person
If
they are
that's
pairing
possible,
with.
but yes, obviously teachers will have to decide depending on their context.
There's a comment from Beatrice. He says, in my experience, I have one of my students can write and listen but not speak, but she came with me in summer study in England and she started talking. Hi again, Dalia.
Right.
There's also a question about how do you use with multilingual classrooms? Because I suppose the Egyptian context is monolingual, so how would that maybe different in a multilingual context, or if you have any tips or advice for multilingual settings?
I mean, I think if the goal is to speak English, then that is the focus. The whole purpose of doing fair work is to have an opportunity to practice speaking English, however that is for the individual child. So whether it's a multilingual or not classroom, the point is to practice English.
Yeah. If you would like just to share with us some, last tips, maybe some tips to encourage autonomy among young learners, what would they be?
I think my number one tip is
We can't hear Dahlia.
listen to the students in your classroom.
Shall I put some tips?
Yes, go
So
ahead.
I think the main thing is to trust your children, trust them that they can do it and that they can be sensible in helping each other learn. So ask them, we did this a different way today. How was that? And try not only to listen to those children who always get the top marks and always are articulate. Try and ask children, in the back row or who hide away sometimes, even if it's privately after the lesson, just pull them aside. So yeah, listen to the children and trust them. And if it means asking them to write a sentence about You could say, what could we do differently? That might be really helpful.
Yes, I agree. Those little things make a huge difference, and I think children in specific they do sense the vibe or the energy of the educator. So
Mm.
uh, giving that energy from the beginning, they it makes them feel that they are safe to speak and make mistakes. So trusting them is very important.
Yes.
Uh, Dalia, would you like to share with us maybe a last tip on how to help students increase their confidence to speak English?
Yeah. I will encourage all teachers not to be
We can't hear
afraid.
you, Dalia.
Really? Um, I don't know what's the problem is. Uh,
No, can I come in with one last tip then? And
Yes,
that is to just remember all the time that what is necessary is time to actually practice speaking English. It doesn't have to be right English. It doesn't have to be more than 5 minutes. But if those children, all of them, every single one in the classroom, are actually speaking in English for 5 minutes each day, that is fantastic.
yes, it does make a huge difference. And lots of comments coming in from all around the world. But you can now you can look at them, Eleanor and Dahlia, when you have time. Also, if you would like to answer any of these comments from our audience. But thank you very much for such an engaging session, and hopefully we can, the maybe teachers can get the chance to read the report
yeah.
and reflect on it more. But great findings, and hopefully teachers can encourage their students to speak English more and more in the classroom. Thank you very much, Dalia and Eleanor, for your time, and
Thank
see you
you.
next time.
Thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much.